Have you ever thought about going on a writing retreat? Today, we're going to talk about it. Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, the podcast for writers, readers, and cooks. This is Kristin Donnelly, and I'm here with Molly Stevens. Hey, Molly.
Hey, Kristin.
Have you ever been on a writing retreat?
Not formally. No. How about you?
I don't think I have either. I've definitely taken writing classes.
Yeah, same. I've looked at them. I've dreamed about them.
Sure.
I either chickened out or couldn't afford it or didn't think I had the time. But no, I look at them all the time.
Yeah. And you have led some cooking retreats.
Yeah. Years ago, I helped someone in Burgundy, and it's Anne Will, and it was sort of offshoot of La Varenne, and she had a chateau, and people would come for weeks, sometimes weeks at a time.
Wow.
And we would teach cooking classes. It was incredible amount of work because they lived in the chateau that we did the cooking classes and day trips and, traveled around Burgundy and went truffle hunting. And yeah, there are stories of what it's like to take care of people at that level, but
I'm sure. Yeah, it's kind of this funny overlap between teaching and creating and then hospitality. Well, I'm excited to talk to our guest today, Kathy Gunst, who is a prolific cookbook author, but more recently has been doing a lot of teaching and leading some food writing related retreats.
Yeah, in Italy, Maine, and California.
Yeah. So she's had this long career and now has found teaching and is so passionate about it. She's the resident chef of NPR's Here and Now, author of 16 cookbooks. Her latest is Rage Baking, The Transformative Power of Flour, Fury, and Women's Voices. That's from 2020. She writes for magazines and newspapers like The Washington Post, Eating Well, Wall Street Journal, Better Homes and Gardens, Yankee Food and Wine, and so many more. She's been teaching food and memoir writing. She is doing something about finding your voice and getting it out into the world in Maine. So it's kind of combining the writing side along with the more pragmatic business of writing side. I am excited to talk to her just about this new phase of her career and, share with our listeners what that might look like should they want to either go on a retreat or host a retreat themselves.
Yeah.
Let's go talk to her. Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, Kathy. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. It's so good to talk to both of you.
We want to focus a lot on the retreats that you're doing because I think that'll be really interesting for people. But before we do that, we just kind of want to go back and talk a little bit about your earlier career. I believe that you left college and you went to the Cordon Bleu in London.
That is correct. Yeah. Way back in the Stone Ages. Yeah.
What prompted that?
It's actually a somewhat embarrassing story at this point. Freshman year of college, I fell in love, not with my husband of a million years, but I fell in love with this man, boy, whatever we were then, and his mother had been to the Cordon Bleu in London. College for me that freshman year was very confusing and not inspiring, and I thought, I need to put a pause on this and I need to do something different. I did not grow up in a home where food was adored or revered. My mother hated cooking. So it was an unlikely choice, but I thought, I want to live in London. So I'll go to this cooking school. It wasn't the other way around. It wasn't the passion that drove me there. I went to what was called the certificate class at the Cordon Bleu, and it was filled with a lot of British women who wanted to become good housewives. I was a bit of an anomaly, a sort of hippie American who's like,
kid.
Wow, London, yeah, and a kid. And then when I came back, I started to work in restaurants in New York City, and I quickly also discovered that being a professional chef was not going to be my path. I started to lose interest in food, being in the grueling kitchen day in, day out. And long story short, I ended up getting a job at a travel magazine called Diversion. It was travel and arts for physicians. And that was my start in food writing and food publishing.
Wow.
Very
It's like
cool.
the heyday of very specialized publications.
very
Yeah.
specialized. But I went to the editor-in-chief, a guy named Steve Birnbaum, who was a leader in travel writing, and I said, hi, I want to be a writer. I was 21 years old, and he said, what do you know? And I thought, I know everything.
Right.
I'm 21. He said, no, you need a specialty. Like, what do you know? And I'm like, well, I just got back from cooking school in London. He goes, write about food. And I remember very clearly thinking, food writing, that's not real writing. I want to be like a literary writer. I want to write novels and great essays. And he gave me an assignment, and my very first article was about mustard. I was hooked. It was so much more than writing about food on the surface. It was all of a sudden I understood, oh, this is about people. This is about religion. This is about community. This is about anthropology. This is about everything. So yeah, 40 something years later, 16 cookbooks later, here I am.
That's amazing. And you've been the resident chef of Here and Now for 25 of those years.
Yeah, I started as the resident chef of Here and Now, the very first show. I'm the only one on Here and now that started when it first went on the air.
Wow.
So being on the radio and talking about food on the radio has been an unexpected and delightful twist in my life. It is counterintuitive. Obviously, there are no visuals. It's about storytelling. It's about describing the experience of cooking something or eating something and creating a story so that people understand. They almost feel like they can see it or taste it or feel it. And that's the job. I mean, you guys are doing a podcast. It's similar. You have to make these stories come to life without people seeing what we're talking about.
Yeah.
What does that job look like week to week?
So I'm on the air 2 to 3 times a month. And at this point, initially, I was cooking live. It's a 2-hour live news show.
I remember that.
Yeah, it's on over 500 NPR stations, and they do the top news, and then the host would run into the kitchen, and I would start what I call a very sound-heavy dish. So I didn't boil pasta. A lot of chopping of parsnips or heating olive oil till there's a real sizzle. Like, it had to have sound. I would do a 7-minute segment at the beginning of a dish, and then at the end of the 2 hours, they would come back to me and I would have cooked it in real time. Well, many wars later and many, upsets in the world, nothing compared to now, but they decided this is too disruptive to go from a war to live cooking. So now I talk about seasonal foods, regional foods. My goal is to inspire people to go home and cook. So a lot of people tell me they hear me in their car. They're picking their kid up from soccer. They're on their way to work. They're on their way home from work. And the best letter I get or an email I get is someone saying, I heard you describe this dish. I made a U-turn. I went straight to the grocery store. I got the ingredients and we're eating it for dinner tonight. Thank you. And that feels like the goal, to inspire people to understand that even in their crazy busy lives, they can still make dinner. I mean, it's an age-old story, but it is still a struggle for so many people.
Yeah.
And at this point, do you have free reign? They just say, Kathy, we want you on the 2nd and 4th week of the month. Bring something?
Pretty much.
Okay.
I actually don't go into the studio. Ever since COVID, I work from my phone on an app that puts me right into the studio. It sounds almost like I'm there. I used to drive down to Boston from my home in southern Maine.
And often bring food.
Always bring food.
Yeah.
So, they keep going, when are you coming back into the studio? And I'm like,
right.
You guys get takeout. I'm happy doing this from home.
That's cool, though, that you have so much control over the segment.
Yeah.
I also just very quickly, I was thinking about food styling, but then how there's audio styling for cooking. Like you were saying, get the sizzle.
I mean, sometimes when I'm describing food, because of the lack of visuals, if there's a technique or something, I'll find myself saying, so you want to take the chicken and you want to pound it until it's not an inch thick, but almost a half. So I'll find myself instinctually using sound effects sometimes if it works, because I think it just helps people get creative and visualize it.
Totally. So you mentioned the 16 cookbooks that you've written, and we found this little nugget. You said you were working on the fourth Stonewall Kitchen book, and you said you felt like you had completely run out of ideas, but then you took a break for a few days, and then you woke up with lots more ideas. So we were just wondering, you've had this long career. So is there anything to say about the importance of like recharging for creativity and how that's shown up in your life?
Yeah, it's such a good question because it comes up for me. It's cyclical. I seem to hit a dead end every really few months where I think, you know what, I think I'm done. I don't think I have any new ideas. And instead of getting depressed or pushing it, I step away. And if I leave it alone, I think cooking is like a lot of creative arts. I've read interviews with painters and sculptors and filmmakers. And I think if you're in a creative field, you are bound to hit a wall. You can't be on and brilliant and thinking up all these incredible new ideas all the time. So when I hit the wall now, I know to step away. And sometimes it's a few days, and sometimes I'll take a whole week because I have to. And then it's so interesting. I don't know if it's like this for you guys, but sometimes I'll dream a recipe or a dish, or I'll be in a museum and see a painting and I'm like, wow, look at where that lemon is next to a rabbit. Like, what if? And ideas come, and I let myself, when I'm in these tough periods of no inspiration, try to let things come in from unexpected places. So I would just say be gentle with yourself. And I think signing off for a day or two or whatever it takes for you is really necessary, even if you're under deadline.
I love this line of conversation. And I'm curious because I think you and I are similar vintage. And I find that it changes as I age as well, and that the ideas and the lulls in creativity. I don't think I've been as gentle with myself. I don't think I've become as aware of the cyclical nature of it. And so I'm just wondering if you find that over the years, over the decades, it sounds like it's sort of a consistent thing.
But it's interesting that you bring that up because I am about to have a very large birthday next month, and I have been reflecting, and I don't think I could have done that in my 20s or 30s, been wise enough, and I will use that word, to know you got to walk away until there's a spark again. You can't push it. Yeah, like you brought up the Stonewall books. That was years ago, but it was a contract to write 4 books. I think it was in 6 months. And, I came out of the gate like a racehorse. I'm like, yeah, I got this, I got
all
that.
All in a lather.
Yeah, we're going to do this. And we finished book 1 and we finished book 2. And then it was book 3 and I felt myself fading. And then book 4 and I thought, you know what? I'm going to give the money back. I can't do this. This is not going to happen. I'm done. I'm drained. And I did my little process of walking away. And then one thing crept up. And then I went out to dinner and I saw something really creative. I'm like, oh, that would work in a home kitchen. And just letting ideas and colors and textures filter back in to get me excited again. And the 4th book of that series, if I remember, it was on appetizers, I thought was the best because I had given up hope and then I recharged and it had a new energy.
Yeah. But I also think that there's that point for me of when you're in your 20s and your 30s, the hustle is everything. I couldn't allow myself to take those little breaks. And maybe in hindsight, I would have been fine if I did and done better work. But
I totally agree. And I watch these TikTok stars and they're posting daily and there's a new recipe every 2 days. And I'm like, how can this be of quality? How can you churn something out new every day or every other day and have it be as good as you want it to be?
Yeah. Let's move to these retreats. They feel really different from writing cookbooks. So how did they start? What made you think this is something that you wanted to do?
I never thought it was something I wanted to do. And more importantly, I never thought it was something that I would be good at. If you had asked me 6, 7 years ago, what do you think about teaching food and memoir writing? I would have been like, no, I'm not the person for it. I think it was pre-COVID, Domenica Marchetti, the Italian food cookbook author, came on vacation in Maine with her family, and she was in the town one over from me, and she contacted me and she said, "You want to meet for coffee?" I'm like, "Oh, I'd love to." We knew each other like just from IACP conferences and that sort of thing. We had a really nice time having coffee, and she started talking to me about these food retreats she does in Italy where she takes people around and teaches Italian cooking. And she said, I've always thought it would be cool to have a food writing trip to Italy. Is that something you'd be interested in? And it took me a hot second to say yes. It was like, yeah. But then I thought, what will that actually look like? And then during COVID, I did some online Zoom teaching of writing. And very quickly, I understood that my 40 plus years of doing this, that this was what I wanted to do. I don't know if I'm going to write another cookbook again, but I wanted to help young writers and established writers find their voice. The name of my classes are Finding Voice in Food and Memoir. What that translates to is very hard to pinpoint, but the idea of voice as being the heart of a narrative. I find that a lot of food writers in particular, but all writers, want to mimic writers who they consider, in quotes, the great writers. Whether it's MFK Fisher or Marcella Hazan or Ruth Reichel or Alice Waters, whoever your person is that you read and loved and it made you think, I want to be a food writer. What I try to teach my students is not to mimic that voice, but to find who they are and how they can tell the story in the most unique individual way. And one of the things I say on the first day is think of your favorite novels, think of your favorite movies. What is it that draws you to that? It's probably not the plot. It's probably the voice, the narration, the sense of a leading character who draws you in, and that is the essence of what you want to do as a writer and what can make very bland, kind of ho-hum food writing that you see in a lot of places transcend to something that's really different and unique and has way more depth. So anyway, Dominica and I decided we would do this, and we started teaching 5 years ago, and we go to a different region in Italy every year. You can be a writer of any level. I don't know how to explain how it works, but we've had people who haven't written since college and others who have been professionally writing within the same group. And there's this beautiful camaraderie, and it just works. So we spend 2 hours in the morning every day writing. I have prompts and I have specific things that I want people to focus on to try to help that voice come out. And then we spend the rest of the day eating and drinking and touring the region and going on bespoke outings to olive oil farms and vineyards and cheesemakers. And it's pretty dreamy.
Sounds terrible.
It's really rough. It's
Yeah.
one of those jobs that someone has to do, and I volunteered.
The 2-hour writing, I'm assuming that's in group.
Yeah. Yes.
But quiet. Is there a time to reflect on those? Are people sharing their writing at any point?
Oh, yeah, sorry. It's not just people writing. We're in workshop. I'm leading the workshop. It's very deliberate. We have prompts. People share their writing. What's most interesting to me is on the very first day, we go around the room and we do the intros. And the question I have is, what do you hope you'll walk away with? What do you hope will happen by the end of this week? And I would say 90% of the time, and I will also say it is primarily women, but not exclusively, people will say, I want more confidence. I want to believe in myself as a writer. And every time that happens, I'm like, damn, this is like a national condition, this idea that we're not good enough. Our voice is not important enough. Our stories aren't worth telling. And by the end of the week, I would say that every single student has written at least one piece that's like, who are you now? You are so different than that person who walked in here. And I'm not trying to beat my own drum because it's very much about the group dynamic and about, there's a lot of positive reinforcement. Not the false kind of like, oh, wow, I really like that. Nice work. It's like, I asked people in the group to listen and to take notes and to say, here's what worked for me. Here's what confused me. Here's what didn't work, and here's why. I don't just like students going, that was good, that was bad. Like, I asked them to try to figure out the why behind it. And the first day, many people struggle with that because it's a different mindset. But by the end of the week, the conversation and the feedback is so deep and so valuable. So yeah, we do that for 2 hours a day, and then we bop around Italy. And I'm also doing 2 workshops in Maine this summer, one in Deer Isle, which is just one of the dreamiest places, at a place called the Pilgrim's Inn, which the New York Times wrote up as one of the 50 best restaurants in the country. And that's with Dominica Marchetti and also Leslie Jonath, who is a publisher and an agent. And this is going to be 4 days of writing, talking about Substack, talking about publishing, talking about getting an agent. So a bit more comprehensive.
I think it's getting your work out into the world added onto the theme of that. And is that what Leslie brings to it?
Yeah, Leslie will talk about the agenting part and the publishing part. A lot of people come to these workshops with ideas for books, but not the momentum, not the drive. And sometimes they also just don't understand all the pieces that need to fall into place to make a book happen, or even to get to a point where you can think about getting. So Leslie will help with that. Dominica's been writing this Substack, so she'll talk about newsletters and the pitfalls of that. And then I'll do my writing workshops for 2 hours every day, and we'll be in stupendous Maine.
If somebody's like considering doing a retreat for any reason, whether it's food writing or something else.
Yeah.
Just from a business perspective, what are some of the real challenges you find?
You talking about hosting one?
Yeah, thank you. Hosting them. Like if somebody wanted to design a retreat around a skill that they want to share.
There are a lot of pieces that have to come into place. So when we do our workshops in Italy, we work with a travel agent on the ground who specializes in food and wine excursions. And, you know, she has clients from all over the world who say, oh, I'm coming to Liguria, put together 5 days of the best eating and drinking. So she takes care of all the details for us of how will the bus pick up the people? Where's the hotel that's going to have a great room that's not like a horrible conference room with no windows? What are the best places to visit in the region? For the Food Writers Retreat in Maine, we've been putting together a lot of the pieces, working with the hotel, and it's kind of been blowing my mind how much there is to juggle. You have to be a travel agent. You have to be a food writer. You have to be with people all day. This is embarrassing, and I'm sure I shouldn't say it, but I'm going to. You have to be upbeat. Like
Yeah.
I tend to retreat and be like, I'm done. I don't want to talk to anybody. But it's like people have paid to come be with Dominica and I would say 99.9% of the people we've gotten in these groups have been so wonderful and so interested in everything that they're just a delight. But you know, you hit that thing on the bus on the way home from the dinner late at night. And, you know, I'll often just say, you know what, I'm just beat. I just need to be quiet, and it's cool. But yeah, I would say if you want to plan a retreat, get ready for a lot of work, because I think working with someone who's an expert in the region you're going to is a very smart thing. Trying to figure out the financial logistics of it are also complicated. You want to be compensated for your time. You don't want to rip people off. You want to give people the top experience. The first 2 years in Italy, we were really undercharging. And we were getting feedback from people like, I'd be willing to stay in a nicer hotel and pay a little bit more. And we're like, heard. Great to know. So you have to know your audience. One of the other issues, too, is we tend to get people over 50 because they have the extra cash. And it's really important to me that we have younger writers and that we have people who are going to learn from us and maybe use it for a lifetime, as opposed to people who are not at the end of their lives, but do you know what I'm saying? Like I want I want the young energy also. So the third workshop I'm doing this summer is also in Maine. It's at a place called Oaks. It's an artist retreat. And I got a grant to go there 3 summers ago. It's very rustic. It's cabins on Lake Kezar, which is one of the most stunning lakes in Maine. And I worked so productively during my residency there. I literally think I got a year's worth of writing done in 10 days. So They came to me this year and said, would you want to do a food and memoir class at Oaks? And I'm like, oh my, I've always wanted to go back there. So I will be doing that in July. And that is way less expensive than these other 2 trips because you're staying in a rustic cabin. We will give people 3 meals a day. You write for 2 hours in the morning with me, and then you have the whole day to hike, kayak, swim, or work. And there's something about being in this really pastoral, spectacular lakeside environment where, at least for me, I mean, I know it, where they have all kinds of artists there. It's so productive. It was kind of insane. I'm like, can I live here? Like, I could get so much done.
Right. But those sound like very different.
Very different. No, they are.
Yeah. I mean, the ones in Italy, you use the word bespoke, but you're traveling, experiencing, cooking classes.
It's like a food experience as much as it is a writing retreat.
And the one at Oaks is really like 2 hours of writing, and then you're on your own. We're not touring around. We're going to eat together, but you really, between writing and swimming, that's going to be your day or my day.
Sounds kind of great. They both sound great, actually.
I know. But this one's way less expensive.
Yeah.
Right.
It's interesting, though, you did say hotels multiple times. And I know some people do retreats where they rent bigger houses. I imagine hotels helps with some of the logistical challenges, I guess.
It does. Like last year, Dominica and I did a workshop in Piedmonte in the north of Italy, and we stayed in a very small boutique hotel where we took over the whole hotel. So like this gorgeous living room was our workshop space. This year, we're going to be in a hotel, but right on the beach in Liguria. So it'll be different. Yeah, I mean, I would just say it's not an easy thing to put together, particularly if you're a writer like you are. Like, what do you know about renting buses and finding rooms that aren't a ripoff? And where do you get lunch because the hotel or the inn doesn't serve lunch? And then it's just a lot of moving pieces. So I'm very grateful for particularly beautiful Liguria, who puts together our on-the-ground tours.
Nice.
In my experience, having done some away cooking in France, where people stayed where we were, it was not a hotel, you then are dealing with people's housing issues, the middle of the night medical situations, their pillow choices. It's a next level of caring for people, hospitality, I should say. So I think if you were going to do that as a business model, you might bring in a hospitality expert or professional to help you take care of people. Because people are away from home. They've lost their luggage. Something's come up. They've spent a lot of money.
They missed their flight.
Yeah.
For me, I feel like my job is to teach and get people writing the best they can write. And I don't want to be thinking about lost luggage, and I don't want to be thinking about food allergies. So someone else gets to think about that. Otherwise, you lose your focus so quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds like a smart way to do it.
I mean, I'm not saying people shouldn't consider it because it's incredibly rewarding and you meet really interesting people. And I would say for me as a writer, teaching, I hear myself talking, I hear myself giving feedback to students. I'm like, Kathy, are you listening? Like, I feel like I'm learning a lot from other students' feedbacks, from the group dynamics, from what works for people and what doesn't. For the past few years, I've been a judge for the Beard Awards, and I don't do it for any reason other than it keeps me up to date with what people are working on, what works and what doesn't, and why. So when I'm judging, I'm doing all the things they ask me. But as someone that leads writing retreats, I'm also looking at this going, why am I putting this piece in first place? What is it about this piece of writing that speaks to me? So for me, very often it's voice and a story that's compelling, but it feels factually accurate. It feels representational. It feels like it's got all the pieces that come together to make a really strong piece of writing. And that's been an education for me that I think has helped me as a teacher.
Yeah.
Earlier, when you were talking about how the workshops, the students are asked to critique or comment on each other's, and I'm thinking, as a writer, that would be so helpful to be forced or, encouraged to look at other people's writing critically, because then when you're alone working on your own piece, hopefully you're developing those critical thinking skills for yourself as well.
Exactly. And one of the things I tell students is I said, when we're critiquing someone, I know you're sitting there going, oh man, I'm next. And you're just getting nervous and you're thinking oh, I should have changed this. I said, please don't do that. Please listen to the critique that other students get, because you will learn more listening to them and what people are saying to them almost than you will about your own work. Because you've got 8, 10 people in a room who all have different perspectives. What are they saying? Why are 6 people saying this piece worked because of the way she described her mother and the setting of this small village? Or why is it important that 5 people are saying, I didn't understand where we were, what the timing was on this, or who was the brother, and it all got very confusing. And by the middle of the week, I can see people's attention shifting away from their brain and their anxieties and their worries about, am I as good as her? Oh, wow, that was really good. I suck. All the voices that we bring to our work. Part of what I try to do is wipe out that noise, all that self-doubt. You watch people shine. I mean, that is the most thrilling part of doing these retreats, is watching people from day 1 to day 5 or 6 or 7 change. It's almost like if I were teaching tennis and they came in the first day and they missed every ball because they're so nervous about proving that they're okay. And then they start to relax and all of a sudden they start playing. Mm-hmm. I've been playing tennis, so I'm using that as an analogy. But the idea of letting go of all those negative voices that we all got at school, and the idea that every woman comes to this workshop and is like, I need more confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is the writing, does it all happen in that time, or do people get sort of assignments and then bring a piece of work for the next day?
The first 2 years we did it, we were giving homework. And there we are in Italy. And after class, we go have this fabulous lunch. And there's usually a wonderful glass of wine. And then we'd go off, say, to a slow food cheese farm and taste 12 different cheeses made there that you can't buy anywhere else. And there's another glass of wine. And then there's dinner. And there's another glass of wine. And then people were like, how am I supposed to go back and do homework? And it was really stressing people out. So I thought, you know what? We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to use these 2 hours. We're going to write. We're going to read. And if anyone ever wants to work on a piece further, which many people do, particularly if they're working on a project or a cookbook or a memoir, and then they, I say, bring it in next day and we'll take a look at it. But when I do the workshop at Hune Oaks, because it's going to be such a relaxed kind of environment, there will definitely be homework. But the other important thing is that people are coming with projects in mind. They're either midway into a cookbook, or they want to start a cookbook, or they want to finish a cookbook. So I say, take all my prompts, alter them to your project. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's also interesting to mention that many of the prompts that I give and many of the writings that I refer to are not food writing. Because I want people to get outside of the mindset of everything has to be about food and everything has to be descriptive and I have to use all the buzzwords to describe the experience of eating this thing. I do something the first class called Glimmers. So we're all sitting there, everybody's a nervous wreck, and they're all thinking, I'm going to have them describe a tomato or something. And I say, I want you to write for 10 minutes 3 different things you observed on your trip here. I don't want it to be about food. And, it could be a smell. It could be the guy on the plane next to you. It could be the revolting thing they served you. It could be the olives you saw on the tree and you've never witnessed I want it out of their head and into the observational world. And I learned this going to a writing workshop about 20 years ago with the writer Pam Houston, who writes short stories. And I'm like, this works for food writing. This works for any type of writing. And then we slowly get more into the minutia of the food writing.
I love it. I haven't done a writing workshop in so long that
you should come.
I know. It sounds so appealing.
It really does. It really does. Yeah. We noticed that your Piedmont retreat coming up in May is sold out. And so you immediately added a second one for October. What does sold out actually look like? And then I guess who's coming to these and how are you marketing them?
So that was last year. We put it out in early spring and it sold out. The most we've ever had is 10 students. You can bring a partner who doesn't want to write at a reduced price. They do everything else. As I said before, these are writers at all levels. Some of them just thought, what a cool way to see Italy. And sure, I'll do writing. I've been keeping a journal. And then there are people who, I'm not going to name drop, who maybe you might know, people who have written cookbooks. We had 2 cousins come last year who are Italian and want to record their family recipes in a book. And they were just like wildly fun and their food sounded incredible. It's a little bit of everything. And we have gotten a few young, as in, under 35 bloggers, people who have saved up because it's a lot of money for a young writer. And they're like, I want to go. I want to learn. I also want to see Italy. I want to eat those foods. I want to drink that wine. And then we've had smaller classes with just 6 writers, but generally 8 to 10. If it gets bigger than that, you can't do it. Not in 2 hours and not with the format that we have. And they are from all over the country. We had a woman from Turkey come last year. Our spring group last year was a very serious group of writers, just coincidentally. Others have been less so. But as I said, somehow there is this camaraderie that begins where people are just really supporting each other, whether they're at like the entry level or they're really solid.
Yeah, it becomes one of those kind of like cherry on top benefits of something like this where you form, this really nice cohort and then have contacts and friends for life.
Oh, and that's the other nice thing is many of these groups have formed writing groups that continue after the trip is over. Cool. Yeah, because they know each other and they know their work. By the end of the week, everybody can name a piece without even hearing who the writer is because we've gotten to know each other's voices.
I feel like you've talked a lot about the confidence piece. Are there other big, I guess, like mistakes or something like that you see people making that you kind of wish like they wouldn't?
That's a really good and really big question. I'm trying to think of how to put it. I think that people get very focused on descriptors when they're dealing with food writing. It's like, oh my God, I went to this restaurant and I ate this dish and I'm going to use every adjective I've ever learned so that people will understand it. But the fact is that that's not what makes us understand it. What makes us understand it is, why was that meal memorable for you? Why did that meal speak to you? Why did that dish or that ingredient or that glass of wine, what was it? And usually when you zoom in on that and push it, a story evolves, which I personally find so much more interesting than this sort of bloggy language that many people use where you can't tell one writer from another. There's kind of this, I'll call it generic food writing, which doesn't really serve anybody. I want to be able to read a piece and going, oh my God, that is so Molly. That is so Kristin. It's like, not because I've met you, but because I know your work and here's your voice. And I'll go look at Molly's Braising book. And there's such a confidence behind the head notes and even the way the recipes are written. Like there's no hesitancy. There's no generic language because God, she knows how to braise food, and it turned into a book. And that book and that writing makes me feel like I got this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this real balance of being authoritative, but also maintaining a perspective and a voice and something that maybe hasn't been done before. I'll read pieces of writing that I love, and the reason that I love them is not because they're the most successful food writers, but because I read a paragraph and I think, I have never thought about 7-Up in that way. I have never thought about applesauce in a hospital room in the way that so-and-so just wrote about it. So the more specificity and the more original vantage point and voice, for me, the better the writing gets.
Yeah. Tori Ritchie's called it happy robot voice.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that was even
that.
before we had like AI, large language models. She used that. And then when AI came out, we're like, oh, it is the happy robot voice.
Well, people are always saying like, oh, I think I can tell when it's AI. And I'm like, that's a problem. If
Right.
people's writing is even slightly like AI, this is a problem.
You've described, Kathy, watching people open up on the page. I think that's the term you use. And I think that's what you're talking about. I guess we're curious, like, what that moment is like. Like, is there a pattern to it in your retreats or when you're teaching someone? I'm sure it's different with every writer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a build-up. I don't know. I don't know why. It makes me think about the way some people parent. Like, there's this whole thing of like praising your child no matter what they do. And so everything becomes obliterated. It's like, good job, you lost, good job, but then there's the praise where you're like, you really worked hard, you really tried that, like where you're honoring your child or your kid. And so in these classes, it usually takes a minimum of 2 to 3 days before you see people relax on the page and people trust themselves and trust the idea that they don't have to mimic the person next to them, that in fact, the less they do that, the stronger it's going to be. For many people, it's the last day. I don't want to give away all my tricks, but I don't care. Also, the last day we do something I call emotional writing, where I ask people to recall something they ate or drank or some sensory experience involving food that was either highlighted or hindered by the emotions of the day. And the example that I give is the day my mother died. We were in her suburban New York home and hospice was there and I was by her bedside, and the hospice woman said, sometimes we just need to give people space. I heard lunch is here. Why don't you go eat with your family? Just give her a few minutes. And I went into the kitchen and there was a spread from my favorite childhood deli, like every favorite food, the corned beef, the pastrami, the chopped chicken liver, like the whole schmear. And of course I had no appetite, but I looked at the food and it was like a Dali painting. It was like dripping with sweat. Nothing looked appealing. And 10 minutes later, the hospice worker walked in and said, she's passed. And my relationship to deli food has forever been altered. So that would be my story that I would write. Conversely, when I first met my husband and he was my boyfriend, there was this sushi restaurant in Midtown Manhattan that we discovered. And it was before sushi was like something people did on a regular basis. And it was like sexy and thrilling and new and different, and it was our place. And I had a job at this travel magazine, and one day my boss said, oh, I'm going to take you to this sushi restaurant. And she took me there, and nothing tasted the same. And I found that so interesting that all the good tastes for me were affiliated with falling in love and being with this man and this sort of sexiness of eating raw fish for almost the first time, and then being with my boss, how it just tasted like food. These are the kind of things that interest me. So I try to get writers in my workshops to explore that. And there are often a lot of tears because if people are telling the truth, it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
It's not a therapy session, but it can get deep and it can get dark. And sometimes that's where the good stuff happens.
Yeah. I guess you have to be prepared going into that.
Oh, yeah. And the reason I leave it till the last day is that there's so much trust built by the 5th or 6th or 7th day. it's hard to do that kind of writing. I personally am very interested in that kind of writing.
Yeah. I'm interested in reading it. Writing it is
a whole other thing. I know. It's probably something you should explore then.
We need to go on this retreat, Kristin.
I know.
There's a lot of work that goes into it. I find myself very depleted after these classes because I just jump in fully. I'm so interested in making people feel their progress and making them feel like, oh my God, I feel so much more confident as a writer. Plus, I just ate the most incredible things and got to see a section of Italy that's, off the beaten path. And in Maine, it will be very different, but it will be about nature and beauty and lobster and bonfires and all that sexy stuff. I am just blown away by how much I love it.
Yeah, it seems like it. Is there anything we haven't talked about in terms of running a retreat that you would tell people they should consider before they think of trying to organize one?
I just would be honest about the amount of work that goes into it and about teaming up with an expert, even if it means you're going to earn less money. Also, for people considering coming, it's really an investment. Coming to a retreat means you're prioritizing your writing life. It means you're financially making a commitment to spend a week writing and being in a new place and being with new people. It means that you're saying, this is important for me, for my profession, for my passion. And I kind of love that about it, that by the time they get there, they've already made a psychological commitment to being present and doing the work and hopefully growing.
Yeah. And as a leader of these, what do you think it takes in terms of credibility, audience? We've talked about infrastructure, but what you and Dominica bring.
So in our case, Dominica, she's just a wealth of information, and then I lead the writing section of it. What's interesting is just because you're a good writer doesn't mean you're going to be a good teacher, and just because you're a good teacher doesn't mean you're going to be a good writer. That's why I've been surprised at how passionate I am about this, because there was nothing in my past that led me to believe that this would be something I would adore.
Perfect.
Amazing.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy. This was such a pleasure.
Thank you for sharing so much.
A really great conversation. Thank you so much.
Before we go, I want to tell you about Food Friends, Home Cooking Made Easy, a podcast for anyone who enjoys shows about cooking and baking. The hosts, Sonia and Carrie, are both former professional chefs and longtime friends, and their show delivers both inspiration and practical kitchen tips. And what I really love is that they love to talk about their favorite cookbooks, new and old, and the recipes that they've tried. New episodes come out twice a week, and I like to listen when I'm on my way to the market or looking for fresh kitchen inspiration. Find Food Friends wherever you get your audio. Get more recipes and info at foodfriendspodcast.substack.com.
Thank you for listening to Everything Cookbooks. For more about each episode, subscribe to our newsletter at everythingcookbooks.substack.com. Here are some other ways to support the show. Go to everythingcookbooks.com and check out our totes, t-shirts, sweatshirts, and other merch, or buy us a round of coffee. You can also leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Thank you, as always, to our editor, Abby Circatella. Until next time, keep on writing, reading, and cooking.